Somebody That I Used to Know by Gotye is one of the best and most popular records of the 2010s, and it's built out of some of the strangest samples that I've come across. I'm going to find those original samples, talk about them a bit, and then try and rebuild the track using Koala. Now, if you're thinking, what samples? Didn't Gotye just play all of the instruments on that record? That's where I was about a week and a half ago, but it turns out that kind of the melodic and rhythmic backbone of the whole song are taken from a couple of real like junk shop records, stuff that you pick up from a thrift shop and not think much about, and you'd easily breeze past these samples, and you certainly wouldn't think to do what Gotye did with them, at least I wouldn't. The first one is by a Brazilian musician called Luiz Bonfa. Luiz Bonfa was a really talented kind of classical bossa nova type guitarist. He started getting famous in Brazil in the 1940s, the late 1940s. By the 1950s, he was playing with like Stan Getz. He was part of that whole bossa nova explosion that happened in the 50s. His biggest kind of contribution to that was a song that I know of as Morning of the Carnival, but Gotye sampled a different one called Seville. And this is the instantly recognizable guitar from it. Now, if I'm trying to reproduce this record in Koala, I hear that sample and I think, amazing, job's a good one. I'm going to drop in that 2-bar loop. That'll go round and round. It's probably half the song. But what Gotye's done, instead of just taking that simple loop, he's in musical terms, I suppose what he's done is he's taken one sentence, which could be chopped up, and made one chopped up sentence. Now, I don't want to go into too much detail about this, and I'm going to make the file that I've created in Koala available if somebody wants to really get into it. But it takes the first note, and then it takes a downbeat chunk sound from the guitar, and then it goes to the next 2 notes, and then it uses that chunk again. And in the background of that, it's got a more melodic ching noise that it plays ching, ching, and the second ching is pitch shifted. And just to remind you, the original sounds like this. I'll give you them both back to back again. Now, was it worth Gotye's time? Yeah, I mean, he sold millions of records. Was it worth my time doing Koala? Yeah, I enjoyed it. Okay. Now, the next sample is a story that I really love. It's by a percussionist called Chaino, who, according to the liner notes of some of his albums, was an orphan from a lost tribe of Africa that very few people had ever visited. He was discovered by American missionaries who went over and then brought him back to the US, where his style of African, raw, sort of passionate playing was something that people had never heard before. In fact, a lot of people said that if you played one of his records when you had female company over, by the time you got to the end of the record, she would either run out of the house screaming or she'd pounce on top of you screaming, depending on how loose her morals were. I mean, the reality is he's a guy from Philadelphia who learned a few African rhythms along the way, but don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. Anyway, leaving that 50s racism and sexism aside, this is the sample you can hear from the record. You can probably imagine it takes quite a lot of chopping up. Every time there's a bit of a downbeat, you've got to stop just before then and get it in the right place. The last video that I put out here was Praise You, Fatboy Slim, and I was a bit sloppy with the way I chopped up the video. I got way more views than I expected. And a lot of the comments are kind of like, why are you so lazy? Why don't you chop up the beats better? So I spent more time on this one. But yeah, hopefully it tells. One of the other most recognizable elements of the song is the xylophone part, which is kind of playing Bar Bar Black Sheep with a couple of the notes changed. Gotye did play that. I'm assuming it's on a xylophone. That's what it sounds like to me. I live in quite a small apartment and I don't teach in a primary school, so I don't have access to a xylophone. So what I did instead is I went around my house and hid a few different things that I found in the fridge until I found one that sounded a bit like a xylophone. I tuned that one note that I'd sampled to the right pitch for the first note of the melody I was going to play, and then play the rest of the melody with the Bluetooth keyboard. You've got to make sure that the sample is set to one shot, otherwise it sounds weird, it keeps cutting off. You've got to mess around with the EQ, add some reverb, and if you're making mistakes, like I certainly did, you can fix them in the piano roll afterwards. And in the end, you get something that I think sounds decent. All in all, I think this track is a lot more layered than I expected when I first started off. You know, it's one of those songs that you've heard on the radio a million times that when you really start to break it down and listen, there's so much going on in there. There's a whistle note, as in he just whistles into the microphone, I think once at about a minute in, and then never does it again. He also takes a single guitar note from another track from that Luiz Bonfa album, and a couple of drum beats from the kind of like Herb Alpert, exotica, Mexican brass type records that I must have flicked past 1,000 times in charity shop bargain bins. I think what's really impressive about the track is how sort of corny and novelty a lot of the samples are. Yeah, the way Gotye put it together and the emotion of the vocal makes it sound like a very deep song that it's just going to be around for the next 10, 15, 20 plus years. Anyway, without the vocals, which save it, see what you think. This is my version.